My name is Brian Taylor. I am a lawyer at Housser Tupper. I've practiced for close to 30 years. I have acted for the real estate industry for close to 30 years. I've been the counsel to the Vancouver Real Estate Board, to the Fraser Valley Real Estate Board for a number of years. I'm currently counsel to the BC Real Estate Association. I've sat on the Standard Forms Committee for probably over 25 years. And I've drafted all of the standard form documents they use. I'm also the author and lecturer of the course that most realtors have taken, which is what brokerages and realtors need to know about agency. Designated agency is really a process whereby the brokerage designates an individual realtor to act as the sole agent for a buyer or seller for a client. If you think that generally what we have now is the brokerage enters into the contract, and if the brokerage says that they're going to be agent, then all of the realtors in that office are the agent for the buyer or the seller. So what designated agency intends to do is we're trying to, and when all the buyers and when all the realtors in the same office act for the buyer or the seller, an individual client, conflicts arise because they're deemed to know everything about all these clients. So what we're trying to do in designated agency is to download what I would say the obligations, the duties of loyalty, disclosure, and confidentiality down to the individual realtor. So only one realtor will be responsible for confidentiality and disclosure and loyalty to the client. Other realtors will have their own clients and be responsible for that. All again under the rubric and the sort of umbrella of the brokerage, which is the one that has to enter into the contract. Well, that's what we're doing. That, I think, is the practice that is going on. We've done a lot of research on this, and under our system of limited dual agency, what limited dual agency says is where you have the brokerage is acting for both the buyer and the seller, the brokerage will treat them impartially and disclose everything to each party except price, motivation, and personal information. Now, when you have a single realtor acting for both parties, that's quite simple. He or she understands they've got two clients. They don't want to favor one of their clients over the other. So they treat them impartially and they make sure the proper disclosures are done except price, motivation, and personal information. However, when you got two realtors in the same office, they don't feel that same sense of impartiality or loyalty. In effect, they only know the seller. They've brought the seller in, they've taken the listing, they've put the listing out there. They feel they're acting in the best interest of the seller, and somebody on the other side of the office may be acting in the best interest of the buyer. Technically, if you think of what our system says is, it is not those realtors that are acting for each of those parties, it's the brokerage. And so the brokerage is supposed to be treating them impartially, and technically the brokerage isn't. Now the irony in all this is, somebody would say, well, isn't that a real problem? But the irony, I think, is that buyers and sellers actually like this system. I think buyers and sellers would be appalled if we said to them, oh, we have to tell the other side everything that you tell us except price, motivation, and personal information. They're quite comfortable with an individual realtor being their realtor, maintaining their confidentiality, disclosing to them, acting in their best interest. They don't have a problem with another realtor in the same office acting on the other side of the transaction. The change will be we could look at this one of two ways. We could go out to the marketplace and say to buyers and sellers and realtors, you've really been doing this wrong for 15 years. Let's teach everybody to say it is going to be the brokerage that holds all of the duties. The brokerage is the one that is going to be advising. The brokerage is going to be the one that's going to be impartial. And all the realtors under that brokerage are going to maintain that sense of impartiality. That would require a whole bunch of retraining of realtors, a whole bunch of change in terms of how realtors practice on a day-to-day basis, and probably a whole bunch of resistance from the public, who I think would say, I don't really like that system. That doesn't feel comfortable with me. I like my realtor. The other option is to say, let's change the system to reflect what's been going on for 15 years, to reflect the commercial reality. I think it's an interesting concept is, if you talk to a buyer or a seller and ask them who their real estate agent is, they don't use the term realtor or brokerage, they use the term real estate agent, they would say, it's Bob Johnson. And if you said, no, it's the brokerage, they would say, no, that's the company that Bob works for. So I think that the public, buyers and sellers, they think that their agent is the realtor. They don't think that their agent is the brokerage. So moving to a system, if we change our system to say it will be the realtor that becomes the agent and not the brokerage, that is something that is not going to be a problem for buyers and sellers, because they think and they want that to be the case. Well, one might argue, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Nobody seems to be complaining. Everybody seems to like this. But the Canadian Regulators Association, which are all of the real estate councils across Canada, they came out with a report a few years ago where they recognized that they were concerned that realtors were not practicing, and this was across Canada, were not practicing limited dual agency in the way the system was designed. And so they've come to the industry and said, we'd like you to either change to reflect what your the way your documentation says you should do it, or change your documentation to reflect that. So it's really driven out of a regulatory sense. They think that the public will be better served. They think that in many ways, and I am in agreement, realtors will be better served if we have a system that reflects what people are doing. I think the impact on realtors will be very slim. That most realtors tell me, and I've taught what brokerages and realtors need to know about agency maybe over 50 times. And I ask the same question. How are people, when you have two realtors in the same office, how do you practice limited dual agency? And every realtor has always told me, I keep the confidence of my client, I treat my client as a sole client, and I let Bob across the office worry about his client. So on that matter, that is exactly what this new system is designed to do. So I would be saying to those realtors, don't change anything you've been doing for the last 15 years, continue to operate in the manner you have, and I will fix the documentation so it reflects what you're doing. For managing brokers, there may be slightly more. Again, I don't think it's going to be a large impact on office practice, but there will have to be some policies put in place dealing with information barriers, how brokerages make sure that confidential information learned by one realtor somehow doesn't get out to other realtors within the office who might be acting for other people. Ironically, I think it's much easier to have that type of information barrier today than it was 15 years ago when we first started limited dual agency. We don't have common fax machines anymore. If you think back in the old days, you had a bullpen. Everybody talked to everybody else. There was a central fax machine where offers came in and anybody could pick them up. Nowadays, most of that has changed. Most people deal directly with the realtor. They have their own devices. They're sending them to secure locations. And the concept of information, protection of information, has really been in place through brokerages for the last 5 or 6 years with the introduction of privacy legislation. So these are things that I think brokerages are already well along that line, so I don't anticipate that's going to be a significant problem. Managing brokers obviously will have questions, that will come up from time to time, and as the system evolves, we will be able to deal with them. But I think that for managing brokers, their role of supervision won't change. The role of the brokerage as collecting deposits, being responsible under the legislation, none of that is going to change. It's all going to remain the same as it was prior to the introduction of designated agency. Well, we've got a couple of things. Designated, we are instituting, the BCREA is instituting a pilot program. It's going to be done in Victoria. That will run for 3 months. We chose Victoria because it's kind of a discrete area. So we've changed all of the documents and made modifications to them. We haven't changed them in a significant way. So it's not like you're looking at brand new documents. It's really the same document, and we've modified it to reflect this concept of designated agency. And so we've made those modifications. Those are all up on a website for the people in Victoria to take a look at, so they can be comfortable and familiar with them before they actually start on the 1st of January. There are information pieces explaining the changes in documents. We also have documents where we have sort of before and after on the same page, so you can actually see how the clause was changed, which we think will be very helpful. On January 1st, the new system will start in play. Listing contracts, multiple listing contracts will be entered into by brokerages on the new forms for designated agency. That pilot program will run for about 3 months. Any problems that arise there, we'll deal with them. Any glitches in the system we'll be able to identify. And then probably starting in June, a couple of months before June, for the rest of the province, we will again, on our website, post those documents for people to become comfortable with, and then it looks like we will introduce it province-wide on June 1st. Even going forward, the BCREA will continue. We'll have a web page dealing with designated agency as questions arise, and they will obviously will, whether there's significant individual fact patterns, problems that have arisen for realtors, for managing brokers. We'll try to set those out in frequently asked questions. We'll ask the question, this is what the answer was. And so in that way, the sense is that we will be able to have a seamless transition. We will be able to create a system that the public wants and accepts. We will basically be able to have documentation that reflects what we've been doing for 15 years. And so I anticipate that there's not going to be a significant amount of impact on either realtors or managing brokers.